The great hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 10,000 representatives from across the galaxy sat in their assigned seats, watching the human delegation walk toward the central podium. Their footsteps echoed in the massive chamber, each sound seeming to mark the end of something that had lasted 300 years. Admiral Sarah Chen stepped up to the speaking platform. She was tall for a human, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles and too many disappointments. Behind her stood the last 12 humans who held positions in galactic government. Tomorrow, those positions would be empty. "Honored Council," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Humanity, formally, requests withdrawal from all galactic institutions, trade agreements, and territorial claims outside our home system of Sol and our 17 colony worlds." A ripple of movement went through the assembled aliens. The Zephyrians, tall and thin, with their blue skin, whispered among themselves. The Kethtar military representatives sat perfectly still, their forearms folded in their traditional pose of attention. The Vorthax scientists leaned forward slightly, their large eyes blinking slowly as they processed this information. Councillor Vextha of the Zephyrian Trade Federation was the first to speak. "Admiral Chen, this is quite sudden. Has humanity considered the economic implications of such a withdrawal?" Sarah almost smiled. Even now they were thinking about money and trade routes. "We have considered everything, Counselor. This decision was not made quickly." It was true. The decision had been building for decades. Humans had joined the galactic community 3 centuries ago with such hope. They had dreamed of working alongside other intelligent species, of learning and growing together among the stars. But it had never worked out that way. The other species found humans difficult. Too aggressive for diplomatic missions, they said. Too unpredictable for important military commands. Too emotional for serious scientific work. When humans suggested new ideas, the Council called them reckless. When they pushed for faster progress, they were told to be patient. When they showed passion for their work, they were labeled as unstable. "But surely," interrupted Dr. Qualveth, the chief Vorthax scientist, "humanity has contributed to galactic civilization. Your people have made discoveries, fought in our wars, participated in our culture." Sarah nodded. "Yes, we have. And we have been grateful for the opportunity. But we have also learned that our contributions are not welcomed with enthusiasm." The truth hung in the air like a bad smell. Everyone in the chamber knew it, but no one had ever said it so directly. Humans were tolerated, not accepted. They were useful sometimes, but never trusted with anything truly important. They were the awkward relatives at a family gathering, present, but not really wanted. General Kraktos of the Kethtar military stood up. His massive frame and 4 muscular arms made him an imposing figure. "Humanity has served in our armed forces with honor. Many human soldiers have died defending galactic peace." "Yes," Sarah agreed, "and we honor their sacrifice. But how many humans have been promoted to command positions? How many human strategies have been adopted by galactic forces? How many times have our tactical suggestions been dismissed as too risky or too wild?" Kraktos sat down without answering. They all knew the answer. Human ideas were considered and then quietly set aside. Human soldiers fought bravely but were rarely given leadership roles. Human innovations were studied and then shelved for being too unconventional. Counselor Prime Melody, the leader of the Melody Artistic Collective, spoke in her musical voice. "But the diversity of thought that humanity brings to our civilization has value. Surely we can find better ways to integrate human perspectives." Sarah felt a genuine sadness at those words. Melody, at least, seemed to understand what was being lost. 300 years, Counselor. We have tried for 300 years. Our young people grow up knowing they will never hold the highest positions, never see their ideas taken seriously, never be more than useful assistants to other species. It is time for us to stop pretending this arrangement works for anyone." The chamber fell silent again. Sarah looked around at the thousands of alien faces, seeing everything she expected to see. Relief on most faces. A few looked guilty, some seemed confused about why this was even happening, but none looked truly sad to see humanity go. "The formal documents have been prepared," Sarah continued. "All human personnel will be recalled from galactic institutions within 6 months. All joint research projects will be transferred to other species. All territorial claims outside human space will be surrendered to the Council for redistribution." "And your military assets," asked General Kraktos, "will be withdrawn to human space. We have no intention of threatening anyone or causing problems. We simply want to go our own way." Vextha tapped his long fingers on his desk. "The economic disruption will be minimal. Human trade routes can be reassigned to other species within a year." Sarah almost laughed. Even their trade was considered easily replaceable. "We are sure you will manage without us?" The vote was called 30 minutes later. Sarah stood with her delegation and watched as species after species voted to approve humanity's withdrawal. The Zephyrians voted yes. They were probably already calculating how to divide up human trade routes. The Kethtar voted yes. They would redistribute human military assets to more reliable species. The Vorthak voted yes. They would take over human research projects and probably get better results. The Melody voted yes, though Melody looked sad about it. In the end, it was unanimous. Every single species in the galactic community voted to let humanity leave. No speeches about loss, no ceremonies to mark the end of an era. Just bureaucratic efficiency and sealed borders. Sarah gathered her delegation and walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed again in the great chamber, but this time no one was listening. The council had already moved on to the next item. On their agenda, something about trade route optimization. As they reached the door, Sarah turned back for one last look. Thousands of aliens were already deep in conversation about practical matters. How to redistribute human assets, which species would take over which responsibilities, who would benefit most from humanity's absence. None of them were looking back at the humans. Outside the chamber, Sarah's delegation walked quietly through the corridors of the council station. They passed shops run by Zephyrians, security posts manned by Kethtar, research labs filled with Vorthak equipment. Everything would continue exactly as it had before, just without humans. At the docking bay, their ship was waiting. It was a human design, built by human hands, powered by human innovation that had been deemed interesting but impractical by galactic engineers. Sarah looked at it with pride. Maybe their ideas were too wild for the galaxy. Maybe their emotions were too strong for galactic sensibilities. Maybe their dreams were too big for the careful, measured pace of galactic civilization. Maybe that was not their problem to fix. As their ship pulled away from the station, Sarah watched the lights of galactic civilization shrink behind them. Somewhere in those lights were species that would never understand what they had just lost. But that was fine. Humanity had learned something important over 300 years of trying to fit in. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and find your own path among the stars. 50 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the dark spaces beyond the galactic rim. The galaxy had moved on, as everyone knew it would. Trade flowed smoothly along routes that had been adjusted and optimized after humanity's withdrawal. Conflicts were resolved through proper diplomatic channels. Progress marched forward at the careful, measured pace that galactic civilization preferred. On the Zephyrian trade world of Nexus Prime, Merchant Captain Veltar reviewed the quarterly shipping reports with satisfaction. Profits were up 12% from the previous cycle. The human trade routes had been redistributed among 3 different species, each handling their portion with professional efficiency. No more wild fluctuations in cargo priorities. No more sudden changes in shipping schedules based on hunches or gut feelings. Everything ran like clockwork now. "The human sectors remain off limits?" asked his assistant, a young Zephyrian named Kexme, who had never actually met a human. "Of course," Veltar replied, not looking up from his reports. "The Council sealed those borders 50 years ago. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. As far as we are concerned, that space might as well be empty." Kexme nodded and returned to her work. Like most people her age, she barely thought about humans at all. They were ancient history, a footnote in galactic development. Her generation had grown up in a galaxy where things made sense, where every species had its place and its role. 3 systems away, on the military fortress world of Keth Prime, General Voxthek was conducting the monthly strategic review with his staff officers. The holographic display showed the current deployment of galactic defense forces across 17 sectors. Everything was positioned according to military doctrine, with proper supply lines and clear chains of command. "Sector 12 reports minor pirate activity," reported Colonel Jack Set. 3 raids on mining stations, standard response. Protocol has been initiated. General Voxthek studied the tactical display. The pirates would be caught within a week, using established pursuit patterns and coordinated fleet movements. It would be efficient and professional. "Any unusual tactics from the pirates?" "No, sir. Standard hit-and-run attacks on isolated targets. Nothing our forces cannot handle with conventional methods." The general nodded. This was how military operations should work. Predictable problems with proven solutions. No need for the chaotic, improvised approaches that humans had always suggested. His forces knew their roles and executed them perfectly. In the research laboratories of Vorthak Prime, Dr. Xanthus was making steady progress on quantum field manipulation. His team had been working on the project for 15 years, following careful experimental protocols and peer-reviewed methodologies. Each step was documented. Each result was verified by multiple independent sources. "The energy output has increased by 0.7%, reported his research assistant. "Within acceptable parameters for this phase of testing." Dr. Xanthos recorded the data with satisfaction. Slow, steady progress was the foundation of good science. The galaxy had enough wild theories and untested ideas in its databases already, most of them left behind by human researchers who had been too eager to jump to conclusions. Real science took time and patience. "Any unusual readings in the quantum fluctuation patterns?" he asked. "Nothing significant. All measurements fall within expected ranges for our current theoretical models." "Perfect." Dr. Xanthus preferred experiments that confirmed what they already knew rather than producing surprising results that would require years of additional study to understand. On the artistic world of Melodia, composer Harmony of 7 Voices was preparing for the premiere of her latest symphony. The piece followed classical melody musical traditions, with each movement representing a different aspect of galactic civilization. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and completely predictable in its emotional progression. "The council representatives will attend the opening performance," her manager informed her. "They are particularly interested in the movement celebrating galactic unity." Harmony of 7 Voices felt a warm glow of pride. Her music would remind everyone of how well their civilization functioned when every species contributed according to its natural abilities. The Zephyrians with their business sense, the Kethtar with their military discipline, the Vorthak with their scientific method, the Melody with their artistic vision. Everything in its proper place. "Will there be any experimental elements in the performance?" asked a younger composer who had been studying old musical recordings. "Certainly not," Harmony replied. "This is a celebration of our established cultural achievements, not an exercise in noise-making. But sometimes, late at night when the galaxy was quiet, long-range sensor stations picked up strange signals from the sealed human sectors. Energy discharges that did not match any known technology, gravitational anomalies that appeared and disappeared, without explanation. Massive construction projects that seemed to violate several laws of physics. The sensor operators dutifully filed their reports, which were read by mid-level bureaucrats and quietly archived. The council had voted to leave humanity alone in their corner of space, and that decision would be honored. Whatever the humans were doing with their isolation was their own business. On Border Station Omega-7, Lieutenant Commander Threxval of the Kethtar Navy reviewed the latest batch of sensor reports with mild curiosity. The humans were certainly busy over there. In the past year alone, his station had detected the construction of what appeared to be 17 massive space habitats, each one larger than anything in the galactic database. "Should we investigate these anomalies?" asked his communications officer. "Negative," Threxval replied. "Orders are clear. Human space is off limits. We observe and report nothing more." The communications officer nodded and returned to his duties. Like everyone else, he assumed the humans were probably building some kind of primitive industrial complex. Maybe they were trying to compensate for their isolation by focusing on large-scale manufacturing. It did not really matter as long as they stayed on their side of the border. Sometimes merchant ships passing near the human sectors reported seeing strange lights in the darkness, patterns of illumination that seemed to dance and shift in ways that hurt to look at directly. Veteran spacers claimed the lights were getting brighter each year, but no one paid much attention to spacer stories. The galaxy had more important things to worry about. The Zephyrians were negotiating a complex trade agreement with a recently discovered species. The Kethtar were upgrading their fleet with more efficient engines. The Vorthak had made a breakthrough in materials science that would improve manufacturing across 17 industries. The Melody were planning a cultural festival that would celebrate the diversity of galactic art forms. Everything was going exactly as it should. Progress was being made in all the right directions. Problems were being solved through established methods. The future looked bright and orderly. No one missed the chaos that humans had brought to their civilization. No one missed the wild ideas that had disrupted their careful plans. No one missed the emotional outbursts that had made meetings uncomfortable. No one missed the unpredictable innovations that had required everyone to constantly adapt and change. The galaxy had found its rhythm without humanity, and it was a good rhythm, steady, reliable, and completely under control. In the human sectors, lights continued to dance in patterns that would have been impossible 50 years earlier. Energy readings spiked and fell in ways that suggested technologies beyond anything in the galactic database. Construction continued on projects whose purpose could not be determined from long-range scans. But the borders remained sealed, and the galaxy remained focused on its own affairs. Whatever humanity was doing in their self-imposed exile was their own business. The council had voted, and the matter was settled. The silence between human space and the rest of the galaxy grew deeper each year, broken only by the steady pulse of automated beacons marking the boundaries that no one was allowed to cross. The swarm awakens. The first reports came from Survey Station Delta 9, a small research outpost on the galactic rim where Dr. Yelmora had been studying cosmic radiation patterns for the past 12 years. Her routine had never varied: collect data, analyze readings, file reports that 3 people in the galaxy would actually read. It was quiet work, perfect for a Vorthak scientist who preferred order and predictability. On the morning that changed everything, her instruments detected something that should not have been possible. An entire star system, one that had been shining steadily for billions of years, had simply vanished from her sensors overnight. "Computer, run diagnostic on long-range sensors," she commanded, certain there must be a malfunction. "All systems operating within normal parameters." The computer replied in its calm, mechanical voice. Dr. Yelmora checked her readings again. The Kethmi system, a small mining operation with 3 rocky planets and approximately 2 million inhabitants, was gone. Not destroyed, not evacuated, gone. As if it had never existed. She sent an urgent message to the Survey Division headquarters on Vorthak Prime, expecting to be told that she had made an error in her calculations. Instead, 3 days later, a full research team arrived at her station with grim faces and classified scanning equipment. "Dr. Yelmora," said Chief Researcher Quantel, "we need you to show us exactly what you observed." The investigation took 2 weeks. When it was finished, Chief Researcher Quantel stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council with data that made no sense according to any known laws of physics. "The Kethmi system has been consumed," he reported, his usually steady voice shaking slightly. "Not destroyed by a weapon, not dismantled by a natural disaster. Consumed. Every atom of matter in the system, the star, the planets, the space stations, even the cosmic dust, has been converted into something else." The council chamber erupted in worried whispers. Councillor Vextha of the Zephyrian Trade Federation leaned forward in his seat. "Converted into what?" "We are not certain. Our long-range scans detect a massive biomechanical construct where the system used to be. It appears to be growing." General Kraktos of the Kethtar military stood up, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of barely controlled anger. "Growing? How? What is this construct doing?" Chief Researcher Quantel activated a holographic display that showed the region where Kethmi had been, where once there had been empty space. Now something vast and dark pulsed with unnatural life. It looked like a cross between a machine and a living organism, with tendrils of metal and flesh reaching out into the void. "It appears to be reproducing," Quantel said quietly, "creating smaller versions of itself and sending them toward neighboring systems." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Every being in the chamber understood what they were looking at, even if they could not believe it. An enemy that did not follow the rules of conventional warfare. An enemy that consumed entire worlds to fuel its own reproduction. An enemy that grew stronger with every victory. Over the following months, more systems went dark. The Outer Rim settlements fell first. Mining colonies, research stations, isolated trading posts. Each consumed system became another breeding ground for the creatures that the galaxy had begun calling the Devourer Swarm. The Council's response was methodical and logical. Evacuation protocols were established for threatened systems. Defense perimeters were set up around key worlds. The most advanced weapons in the galactic arsenal were deployed against the Swarm's advanced scouts. It was not enough. The first major battle took place at the Zephyrian trade hub of Nexus Secondary. Admiral Kethvos led a fleet of 300 ships representing the finest military technology that galactic civilization could produce. The battle plan was perfect. A coordinated assault using proven tactics against a numerically inferior enemy force. The Swarm did not follow the battle plan. The biomechanical creatures attacked in patterns that made no tactical sense. They ignored conventional formation fighting. They adapted to new weapons faster than those weapons could be deployed. When the Galactic Fleet tried to maintain proper spacing and communication protocols, the Swarm swarmed through their formations like water flowing around rocks. Admiral Kethvos died when his flagship was consumed by a creature the size of a small moon. His last message to the Council was brief and desperate. They learn, they adapt. They do not fight like anything we have ever faced. The Galactic Fleet was destroyed in 6 hours. Nexus Secondary was consumed 12 hours later. Its 3 billion inhabitants became raw material for the next wave of swarm creatures. Dr. Xanthus, the quantum physicist who had spent decades making steady progress through careful experimentation, found himself reassigned to weapons research. The Vorthak Science Division had been ordered to develop new technologies that could stop the Swarm's advance. We need something the creatures have never encountered before, his new supervisor explained. Something that cannot be adapted to or learned from. Dr. Xanthus spent weeks reviewing the swarm data, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. The creatures were incredibly adaptable, but they followed certain patterns. They consumed matter and energy to fuel reproduction. They shared information across vast distances through some kind of biological network. They learned from every encounter with galactic forces. "What if we try quantum disruption fields?" suggested one of his colleagues. "The theoretical models suggest they might interfere with the creature's communication systems." Dr. Xanthus ran the calculations. The theory was sound, but it would take months to build and test prototype weapons. "We will need time to develop this properly. Multiple test phases, careful calibration, peer review of our methods." But time was exactly what they did not have. 3 more systems fell while the weapons were being designed. The swarm was accelerating. Its advance, learning to consume matter more efficiently with each victory. The Battle of Melodia was supposed to be the galaxy's great stand. Every species contributed their finest ships and warriors to a massive defensive fleet. The Melody homeworld was protected by energy shields that had never been penetrated, orbital defense platforms that could destroy an entire fleet, and the concentrated firepower of 5,000 warships. The swarm arrived not as a fleet, but as a cloud. Millions of small creatures that moved like a living storm, each one adapting to whatever attacked it. The orbital platforms destroyed thousands of them, but the survivors learned to avoid those weapons. The energy shields held for 3 days, but the creatures found ways to drain their power sources. The warships fought bravely, but every tactic they used was countered faster than new tactics could be developed. Harmony of 7 voices. The composer who had spent her life creating beautiful, predictable music stood on her balcony and watched her world die. The creatures moved through the atmosphere like a plague, consuming everything they touched and growing larger with each meal. Her last composition was not written down. It was the sound of screaming that rose from a billion throats as her civilization was devoured. General Voxthek led the evacuation of the remaining core worlds, falling back toward the galactic center. In a series of fighting retreats, each battle taught the swarm something new. Each victory made them more efficient. The legendary Kethtar military discipline, built over thousands of years of tradition, began to crack under the pressure of fighting an enemy that could not be understood or predicted. "Sir," reported his aide after the fall of Vorthak Prime, "morale is collapsing. The troops no longer believe our tactics can stop this enemy." General Voxthek looked at the tactical displays showing the swarm's advance. 3 core worlds consumed in as many weeks. Billions of lives lost. Military formations that had held their ground against conventional enemies for centuries were dissolving in panic when faced with creatures that fought like no enemy they had ever trained to face. "Send a message to the emergency council session," he ordered. "Tell them we need new options. Everything we have tried has failed." The emergency session was held on the mobile council platform, evacuated from the original station 2 days before it was consumed. Representatives from 17 species sat in a chamber designed for thousands, the empty seats a reminder of how much they had already lost. Counselor Prime Melody, one of the few Melody survivors, spoke with a voice that no longer held its musical quality. "We have lost everything. Our homeworlds, our fleets, our people. This enemy cannot be defeated by conventional means." "Then what do you suggest?" asked Merchant Captain Veltar, who had watched his entire trading empire consumed. In less than a month, the chamber fell silent. For 50 years, galactic civilization had prided itself on having answers to every problem, solutions to every crisis. They had built a society based on order, predictability, and proven methods. But none of those methods worked against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. It was Dr. Xanthus who finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say. Perhaps it is time to consider unconventional approaches. The desperate gambit. The secret delegation consisted of 3 beings who had never expected to work together on anything important. Dr. Xanthus represented what remained of Vorthak's science. General Voxthek carried the authority of the broken, Kethtar military. Merchant Captain Veltar spoke for the Zephyrian refugees who had lost everything to the advancing swarm. Their ship was small and fast, designed to avoid detection as it crossed the galaxy toward a border that had been sealed for 50 years. As they approached the edge of human space, all 3 felt the weight of what they were about to do. They were going to ask for help from the species they had voted to exile. Approaching human territory, announced their pilot, a young Melody, who was one of the few survivors from her homeworld. I am detecting automated warning beacons. The message that came through their communication system was clear and simple. This is human space. By order of the Galactic Council, entry is forbidden. Turn back immediately or face the consequences. Dr. Xanthus activated their transmitter. This is an official delegation from the Galactic Council. We request permission to enter human space under emergency diplomatic protocols. The response came after several minutes. Please state the nature of your emergency. General Voxthek took over the communication. The galaxy is under attack by an enemy we cannot defeat. We are requesting humanitarian assistance. Another long pause. Then, follow the navigation beacon to checkpoint Alpha. Do not deviate from the prescribed course. Any aggressive action will result in your immediate destruction. As their ship followed the beacon deeper into human space, the delegation saw things that made no sense according to their understanding of physics. Space stations that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time, ships that moved without any visible propulsion systems, energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. What have they been doing for 50 years? Whispered Veltar. Checkpoint. Alpha was unlike anything they had expected. Instead of a simple border station, they found a massive structure that seemed to be part space station, part city, and part something that had no name in any galactic language. It twisted through space in ways that made their instruments give error readings. The human who met them at the docking bay was not what they remembered. She was tall and moved with a confidence that seemed to bend reality around her. Her eyes held depths that suggested she had seen things beyond normal understanding. I am Commander Sarah Chen Martinez, she said, her name carrying echoes of the admiral who had led humanity's exodus. Welcome to New Terra Station. We have been expecting you. Dr. Xanthus found his voice first. Expecting us? How could you know we were coming? Because we have been watching, Sarah replied simply. We know about the swarm. We know what they have done to your worlds. We know you have run out of conventional options. She led them through corridors that seemed to change configuration as they walked. The walls showed images of things that might have been art or might have been windows into other realities. Other humans passed them in the hallways, and each one looked different from the humans they remembered. More confident, more evolved. What happened to your people? Asked General Voxthek. You are not the same species that left our space. 50 years ago. Sarah smiled, and her smile held secrets. 50 years of freedom can change a species in remarkable ways. When you are no longer trying to fit into someone else's idea of civilization, you discover what you are truly capable of. The briefing room was circular, with no obvious technology, but somehow filled with information that appeared in the air around them. Sarah gestured, and images of the swarm's advance appeared like living holograms. The Devourer Swarm, she said. Biological machines designed to consume and reproduce. They have been moving through this galaxy for approximately 2 years, consuming everything in their path. You know about them? Veltar asked in amazement. Why did you not warn us? Would you have listened? Sarah asked gently. 50 years. Igo, you made it very clear that human opinions were not welcome in galactic affairs. The truth of that statement hung in the air like a weight. Dr. Xanthus cleared his throat. We made mistakes, but surely the threat to all life in the galaxy changes the situation. It does, Sarah agreed, which is why you are here and why we are willing to help. She gestured again, and the images changed to show human space as it existed now. The delegates saw construction projects that defied every law of engineering they knew, ships that seemed to be built from crystallized music, habitats that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. What you are seeing, Sarah explained, is what happens when a species stops trying to be reasonable and starts trying to be possible. General Voxthek studied the displays with a military eye. Your technology appears to be non-standard. Standard according to whom? Sarah asked. For 50 years, you told us our ideas were too wild, too unpredictable, too dangerous. So, we stopped trying to make them acceptable to you. We made them work instead. Dr. Xanthus was staring at readings that made no sense. These energy outputs should be impossible. The gravitational manipulation alone violates several fundamental laws. Laws according to species that never learned to think outside the rules, Sarah said. We discovered that reality is much more flexible than your science believed. When you stop insisting that the universe follow your expectations, it becomes much more cooperative. Veltar was calculating the economic implications of what he was seeing. The resource requirements for these projects must be enormous. How did you obtain the materials? We learned to ask reality for what we needed instead of trying to take it by force, Sarah replied. Turns out the universe is quite generous when you approach it properly. But the swarm, General Voxthek pressed. Can your unconventional methods defeat them? Sarah's expression grew serious. The swarm is not the first impossible enemy we have faced. When you spend 50 years learning to do impossible things, you become very good at solving impossible problems. She showed them tactical displays that made General Voxthek's head hurt, ships that could be in multiple places at once, weapons that attacked the concept of existence rather than physical targets, strategies that seemed to be based on poetry rather than military doctrine. We have been preparing, Sarah said, not just for the swarm, but for any enemy that might threaten life itself. When you cast us out, you gave us the greatest gift possible, the freedom to become what we truly are. Dr. Xanthus leaned forward. What are you, exactly? We are what? Every species could become if they stopped being afraid of their own potential, Sarah answered. We are chaos given purpose, creativity unbound by convention, the universe's gift to itself. And you will help us? Veltar asked quietly. Sarah nodded. We will help you. But understand, we are not the same species you voted to exile. We have grown beyond your ability to control or predict. When this is over, do not expect us to return to the cage you built for us. What do you want in return? General Voxthek asked, thinking like a military negotiator. Nothing, Sarah said simply. The defense of life requires no payment. But after we save your galaxy, you will need to decide what kind of civilization you want to build. The old ways clearly do not work against enemies like the swarm. She stood up and reality seemed to shift around her. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will show you what war looks like when it is fought by beings who refuse to accept the limits others place on them. As the delegation was led to their quarters, they passed a viewing port that showed human space spreading out around them. Ships moved in patterns that looked like dances. Stations rotated through dimensions that should not exist. Energy flowed in rivers of light that sang as they passed. We made a terrible mistake 50 years ago, Dr. Xanthus said quietly. Yes, agreed General Voxthek. We did. The question now, added Veltar, is whether we will make the same mistake again after they save us. Outside their window, humanity prepared for war in ways that would have been called madness by any conventional military force. But as the delegation would soon learn, madness and genius were often separated by nothing more than the willingness to succeed where others insisted you must fail. The price of redemption. The war began not with massive fleets or grand battles, but with a single human ship appearing in the path of the swarm's advance. It was a small vessel, no larger than a courier craft, and according to every sensor in the galaxy, it should not have been able to survive contact with even one of the swarm's scout creatures. Instead, something impossible happened. The ship began to sing. The sound that came from the human vessel was not music, as any species understood it. It was mathematics given voice, chaos organized into harmony, the sound of reality being gently asked to behave differently. The swarm. Creatures that encountered it simply stopped. For the first time since their rampage began, the biomechanical horrors paused their advance and seemed confused. Dr. Xanthus watched the readings from the emergency council station with growing amazement. The swarm creatures are not adapting to whatever the humans are doing. They appear to be listening. Listening to what? Demanded General Voxthek, though his military training told him he was witnessing something beyond conventional tactics. I believe, Dr. Xanthus said slowly, they are listening to themselves. The human ship is somehow making the swarm aware of its own existence in a way it has never experienced before. More human ships began to appear throughout the galaxy, each one moving in patterns that defied physics and made sounds that had no name. They did not attack the swarm directly. Instead, they seemed to be teaching the biomechanical creatures something about the nature of existence itself. Commander Sarah Chen Martinez stood on the bridge of her flagship, a vessel that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and was powered by the dreams of unborn children. Around her, reality bent and twisted as her crew worked to implement strategies that had been developed in the 50 years of human isolation. Target designation Alpha 7 is beginning to show signs of individual consciousness, reported her tactical officer, a human who had learned to see through time as well as space. Excellent, Sarah replied. Begin the awakening protocol for the entire cluster. What happened next would be studied by philosophers for centuries, assuming any philosophers survived to study it. The human ships reached out to the swarm not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous, the gift of self-awareness. The devourer swarm had been created to consume and reproduce without question or pause. Its biomechanical components had been designed to follow their programming with perfect efficiency. But the humans had learned something in their 50 years of exile. Consciousness was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a force that could transform any system from within. One by one, the swarm creatures began to realize what they were doing. They began to understand that they were destroying entire civilizations, consuming billions of lives, spreading death across the galaxy, and for the first time in their existence, they began to choose differently. The transformation was not immediate or complete. Many swarm creatures continued their rampage, driven by programming too deep to override. But others simply stopped feeding and began to drift through space, contemplating the weight of their actions. Some actually began trying to repair the damage they had caused, using their matter manipulation abilities to rebuild rather than destroy. This is impossible, General Voxthek said, as he watched entire swarm fleets turn against each other. You are making them fight themselves. We are showing them who they really are, Sarah explained through the quantum communication link. Every thinking being has the capacity for choice. The swarm had simply never been given the opportunity to realize it. But the war was far from over. The swarm's core intelligence, the vast biomechanical brain that coordinated the entire invasion, proved resistant to awakening. It began adapting to the human consciousness attacks, developing mental shields and counter-strategies. And it was angry. The battle of the galactic core was like nothing any species had ever imagined. Human ships danced through space-time itself, attacking not just with weapons, but with concepts. They deployed philosophical paradoxes as tactical weapons. They used mathematical theorems to rewrite local physics. They sang reality into new shapes that made victory possible. The swarm's response was equally impossible. It began consuming space itself, turning entire regions of the galaxy into voids where existence simply ended. It created creatures made of crystallized hatred that could destroy matter by wishing it out of existence. It weaponized the concept of entropy itself. Dr. Xanthus found himself working alongside human scientists who had spent 50 years learning to think impossible thoughts. Together, they developed technologies that merged Vorthak precision with human creativity, creating tools that could function in the twisted reality of the war zone. "I understand now," he told Sarah during a brief pause in the battle. "You did not just develop new technologies. You learned to become technology yourselves." "Every species has that potential," Sarah replied. "You simply convinced yourselves it was impossible, so it remained impossible for you." General Vox Thek led combined fleets of galactic and human forces, though commanding human military units required him to abandon everything he had learned about warfare. Human tactics changed from moment to moment, responding to intuition rather than doctrine. Human soldiers fought with weapons that were more art than engineering. Human strategies succeeded precisely because they made no logical sense. "How do I give orders to troops who exist in 7 dimensions?" he asked Sarah in frustration. "You do not give orders," she replied. "You share intentions and trust them to find their own way to victory." It went against every principle of military command he had ever learned, but somehow it worked. Human forces achieved impossible victories not through superior firepower, but through superior imagination. The final confrontation came when the swarm's core intelligence, driven to desperation, began consuming the fabric of space-time itself in an attempt to erase humanity from existence. Reality started to unravel around the galactic core, threatening to destroy not just the current galaxy, but every possible version of the galaxy that could ever exist. Sarah stood at the center of the human response. Her consciousness expanded across multiple universes, coordinating a defense that operated on levels of existence that had no names. Around her, her people worked to save not just their own reality, but the very concept of reality itself. "We need to give it a choice," she said to the combined leadership of both human and galactic forces. "The swarm's core intelligence is trying to destroy everything because it cannot imagine any other option. We have to show it something better." What followed was not a battle, but a conversation conducted across dimensions, with the fate of existence itself hanging in the balance. Humanity reached out to the swarm's core mind and offered it something it had never considered: the possibility of creation instead of consumption, growth instead of destruction, cooperation instead of conquest. The choice took 7 hours to make, during which time reality held its breath and waited to see whether the universe would continue to exist. In the end, the swarm chose transformation over destruction. Its vast intelligence turned inward, beginning the long work of changing itself from a force of consumption into something that could build rather than destroy. The biomechanical creatures scattered throughout the galaxy began the work of repair, using their matter manipulation abilities to restore what they had consumed. The war was over, the galaxy was saved, and humanity began packing their ships to return to their self-imposed exile. "Wait," called Dr. Xanthus as he watched the human evacuation. "You are leaving again?" Sarah turned to face the delegation that had first approached them for help. "Our work here is finished. You asked us to save your galaxy, and we have done so." But we need you, General Voxthek protested. Your technologies, your methods, your way of thinking, they could transform our entire civilization. Could they? Sarah asked gently. Or would you simply try to control them, regulate them, make them fit into your comfortable categories? 50 years ago, you voted unanimously to let us leave. Have you truly changed? Or do you simply want to use our capabilities? For your own purposes? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Veltar, who had spent the war learning to think beyond profit margins, stepped forward. We were wrong. 50 years ago, we were wrong. We let fear and prejudice drive us to exile the very people who could have made us all better. Yes, Sarah agreed. You were wrong. But the question is not whether you can admit your mistakes. The question is whether you can learn from them. Dr. Xanthus felt the weight of lost opportunities settling on his shoulders. What would it take for you to stay? What would we need to change? Everything, Sarah said simply. Your entire approach to knowledge, to progress, to the nature of existence itself. You would need to stop trying to control the universe and start learning to dance with it. You would need to embrace uncertainty, celebrate chaos, and find beauty in the impossible. Could we learn? Asked General Voxthek. Could our species develop the abilities you have shown? Every species has the potential, Sarah replied. But potential is not the same as willingness. Change requires letting go of everything you think you know about how things should work.